My name is Rayburn, Ray to most folks. I'm 53 now, but this happened back when I was 48. I'm a pipe fitter by trade, local 211, been doing it 30 years. It's hard work, honest work. It pays the bills and keeps my hands busy. I live in a small town just east of the Trinity River, the kind of place where everybody knows your truck and your business, for better or worse. I'm not a storyteller. I'm not looking for a TV show or a book deal. To be honest, telling this at all makes my stomach turn over. It feels like picking at a wound that never quite healed right. But my wife, bless her heart, says maybe getting it out, just putting it into words for someone else to hear, might take some of the weight off. I don't know if I believe that, but I'm tired enough to try. I know how this is going to sound. I've heard the stories on late-night radio, seen the grainy videos on the internet. I was the guy who'd laugh and say, "That's just a mangy bear," or "Someone's having a good time with a costume." I was a skeptic, not because I thought people were lying, but because the world I knew was made of steel pipe, pressure gauges, and the solid, predictable cycle of the seasons. The things I dealt with were real, tangible. You could put a wrench on them. What I'm about to tell you, you can't put a wrench on it. And it was more real than anything I've ever touched. Before I get into what happened, if you're new here, consider subscribing. I don't do this often, but when I do, it's because it needs to be said. And drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. I always like to know who's listening. All right, let me tell you what happened on that piece of land in Polk County. It was late October, the first real cold snap of the year. The air in East Texas finally loses that soupy, miserable humidity, and you get these crisp, clear nights where the stars look like holes punched in black velvet. It's the best time of year for hog hunting. We had a lease, about 800 acres of thick, piney woods mixed with hardwood bottoms and tangled creek beds. It was perfect hog country. I'd been hunting that land for a decade with my brother-in-law, Dale. We knew every trail, every wallow, every game camera location. Dale's a bit older than me, a retired lineman. He's steady, not a man given to flights of fancy. With us that night was his nephew, Travis, who was maybe 22 at the time. Good kid, but green. Eager to impress, always fiddling with his new rifle or some piece of high-tech gear he'd bought. The real hunters, though, were the dogs. We had 3 that night. Copper and Bell were our bay dogs, plot-hound mixes, lean and fast with incredible noses. Their job was to find the hogs and corner them, barking like crazy to let us know where they were. Then there was Daisy. She was the catch dog, a squat, muscle-bound bulldog Catahoula mix. Sweetest dog you'd ever meet until it was time to work. Then she was all business, fearless. Her job was to go in, grab the hog by the ear, and hold on until we got there. They were incredible animals, not just tools. They were family. We got out to the lease around 8 o'clock. The moon was a little over half full, bright enough to cast long skeletal shadows from the pines. We parked the truck by the main gate, and the air was dead still and cold, maybe 45 degrees. You could smell the pine needles and the damp earth. We went through our usual routine, checking the GPS collars on the dogs, loading the rifles. I carried a 30-30 lever action. Dale had a 12-gauge with slugs, and Travis had his fancy AR-10 in 38, and making sure our headlamps had fresh batteries. It was all rote, muscle memory. 1,000 nights just like this one. We let the dogs out of their boxes in the truck bed, and they hit the ground, shaking and sniffing, electric with anticipation. Copper let out a sharp, eager bark. Bell ran in tight circles. Daisy just stood there, tail giving a slow, powerful thump, thump, thump against the truck's tailgate, watching me, waiting for the word. I gave her a good scratch behind the ears and said, "All right, girl, go find 'em." And they were off, melting into the darkness of the tree line like ghosts. We gave them a few minutes to get out ahead, then we started walking, following their tracks on the GPS handheld. The night was full of its usual sounds, the crunch of leaves under our boots, the distant call of a barred owl, the hum of insects that never quite give up, even in the cold. It was peaceful. It was exactly where I wanted to be. For the first hour, everything was normal. The dogs were working a scent, their icons on the GPS screen moving in that searching zigzag pattern a couple 100 yards ahead of us. We walked at a steady pace, not talking much, just listening to the woods. Dale pointed out some fresh rubs on a cedar tree. Travis was asking about the best shot placement on a big boar. Mundane stuff. Then around 9:30, the feeling of the woods began to change. It's hard to describe if you haven't spent a lot of time out in it. It wasn't one thing. It was a lot of little things. The insects went quiet. Not a gradual fade, but like someone flipped a switch. The owl stopped calling. The air, which had been still, now felt heavy, stagnant. It was a dead-level silence that felt unnatural, like the woods were holding their breath. Dale must have felt it too. He stopped and just stood there, head cocked, listening to the nothing. I looked over at him. He just gave a little shrug, his face unreadable in the green glow from my headlamp. Travis didn't seem to notice. He was too busy looking at his phone, probably checking the signal, which was non-existent out there. I looked down at the GPS. The dog's icons had stopped moving. They were clustered together about 300 yards to our northeast, right on the edge of a thicket we called the Devil's Nest, because it was so choked with briars and yopon holly. They weren't baying, though. That was the first real alarm bell in my head. When they corner a hog, you can hear them for a mile. It's a frantic, non-stop concert of barks and yelps. But the GPS said they were stationary, and the woods were tomb silent. "Something's not right," I said, my voice sounding too loud. Dale nodded slowly. "They've got something," he whispered, "but they don't like it." He clicked the safety off his shotgun. The sound was like a firecracker in the quiet. Travis finally looked up from his phone. "What is it? A big one?" I could see the excitement in his eyes. "Just be ready," I said, trying to keep my voice even. My own heart was starting to beat a little faster. Your mind starts running through the possibilities. Maybe a big cat, a mountain lion. We'd seen tracks once or twice over the years, or a black bear that had wandered way south. Both were bad news for the dogs, but they were known quantities. Things we had a category for. We started moving toward their position, a lot more carefully now. We had to push through some thick brush, branches scraping at our jackets, thorns snagging on our pants. The silence was so complete that every little noise we made felt like a betrayal. And then we started to smell it. It wasn't the rank, earthy smell of a wild hog. It was something else. It was thick, musky, like a wet dog that had rolled in something dead. It had a sharp, metallic tang to it, too, like old blood. The smell got stronger the closer we got. So thick, it was like you could taste it on the back of your tongue. We were maybe 50 yards out when we heard the first sound from the dogs. It wasn't a bark. It was a high, terrified whimper. It was Belle. My blood went cold. I've heard dogs get hurt before. I've heard them fight. I had never heard a sound like that come out of one of my dogs. It was a sound of pure, abject terror. Then another sound cut through the night, a sound that didn't belong to any animal I've ever heard in the woods of East Texas or anywhere else. It was a low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate in my chest cavity. It was deep, resonant, and full of a kind of intelligent malice that made the hair on my arms stand straight up. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a coyote. It wasn't a big cat. My brain was cycling through its catalog of known threats and coming up with nothing. We were in the dark, literally and figuratively. Dale looked at me, his eyes wide above his gray beard. "Ray," he breathed, "what in God's name is that?" I didn't have an answer. I just chambered around in my 30-30. The metallic shuck of the lever action felt small and inadequate. We moved forward, slower now, pushing aside the last wall of yopon branches to look into a small, moonlit clearing. And that's when my world, the one made of steel pipes and predictable seasons, broke apart. The clearing was maybe 40 feet across. The moonlight cut through the canopy, painting everything in shades of silver and black. The first thing I saw was Belle. She was lying on her side near the middle of the clearing, a dark, still shape. She wasn't moving. Copper was 10 feet away from her, crouched low, his body trembling, a low whine caught in his throat. He wasn't baying, he was pleading. And Daisy, my fearless Daisy, was pressed so low to the ground she looked like a puddle of muscle, her teeth bared, a horrifying, continuous growl rumbling from her chest. She was staring past Belle, at the thing that stood over her. At first my brain tried to make it a bear. It's what my mind desperately wanted it to be. It was standing on 2 legs, hunched over slightly, and it was big. But the longer I looked, the more the bear explanation fell apart. It was too tall for one thing, easily 7.5, maybe 8 feet tall. And it wasn't built like a bear. A bear is bulky, round. This thing was lean, corded with muscle like a greyhound, but massive. It was covered in dark, matted fur, somewhere between black and gray, but it was patchy in places, showing dull, leathery skin underneath. Its legs were long, with that backward-bending joint you see in a dog, a digitigrade stance that looked profoundly wrong on something that size. Its arms were long, too, ending in what I can only describe as hands. They weren't paws. They were 5-fingered hands, thick and powerful, with dirty, yellowed claws extending from the fingertips, claws like obsidian knives. It had its back mostly to us, its attention on the dogs. It slowly turned its head to look over its shoulder, and that was the worst part. That was the part that still wakes me up at night. It wasn't a mask. It wasn't a costume. It was a head that was fundamentally, horrifyingly canine. It had a long snout, like a wolf or a shepherd, lined with black lips that were pulled back in a silent snarl, revealing enormous yellow fangs. But the eyes weren't an animal's. They were set forward in the skull, not on the sides, and they glowed with a faint, sickly yellow-green light that wasn't just reflected moonlight. It was an internal luminescence, and they were intelligent. They weren't the flat, instinct-driven eyes of a predator. They were aware. They looked at us, and I felt like I was being measured, assessed, and dismissed, all in the same instant. It let out a soft huff of air through its nostrils, a cloud of vapor in the cold night. The rotten, coppery smell washed over us. For a few seconds, which felt like an eternity, nobody moved. We were frozen, Travis, Dale, and me, paralyzed by a sight that our minds had no framework to process. My hands were gripping my rifle so hard my knuckles were white, but the thought of raising it, of actually firing, seemed absurd, like throwing a rock at a hurricane. My brain was still trying to rationalize, to find an explanation. A guy in a suit? No. The way it moved, the anatomy, the sheer physical presence of it was undeniably real. A mutated animal? A government experiment? All the stupid things you hear about, they all flashed through my head, and none of them fit the terrible, living reality that was standing 30 feet in front of me. The creature broke the stalemate. It took one of its clawed hands and casually, almost dismissively, pushed Belle's body with its fingertips. The gesture was so chillingly deliberate. It wasn't the action of a dumb animal. It was a display, a statement. Then it straightened up to its full height, and a deep, rattling growl started in its chest, a sound that felt like it was coming from the center of the earth. That sound finally broke our paralysis. Travis let out a choked gasp and started to bring his AR-10 up. It was a clumsy, panicked movement. The creature's head snapped toward him, its yellow eyes locking onto the young man with an intensity that was terrifying. I saw its muscles bunch under its hide. "Don't!" I hissed, but it was too late. Travis shouldered the rifle. The thing moved. I can't properly explain the speed. It wasn't a run or a leap. It was an explosion of motion. One moment it was standing by my dead dog. The next it was covering the distance to Travis in 2 impossibly long strides. It didn't make a sound as it moved. Dale yelled, a raw, wordless shout of alarm. Travis got one shot off. The roar of the .308 was deafening in the small clearing, the muzzle flash a brilliant orange flower that momentarily blinded me. I heard the bullet hit with a wet, heavy smack, like a sledgehammer hitting a side of beef. The creature grunted, a deep, guttural sound of pain and rage, and faltered for a half-second. But it didn't go down. It didn't even seem to slow down. It was on Travis before he could fire again. One of its long arms swung out, a black blur in the moonlight. I saw the claws flash. It wasn't a swatting motion like a bear. It was a precise, targeted strike. The claws connected with the side of Travis's chest and his rifle. There was a sound of tearing fabric and a sharp crack of metal and plastic. Travis screamed, a thin, high-pitched sound of agony, and was thrown backward as if he'd been hit by a car. He landed in a heap 10 feet away and didn't move. His rifle was on the ground in 2 pieces, the stock shattered. Dale, standing to my right, recovered first. He brought his 12-gauge up and fired. The boom of the shotgun was even louder than the rifle, a physical concussion that shook the leaves on the trees. The load of buckshot tore into the creature's side and shoulder. It roared this time, a full-throated, terrifying sound that was a mix of wolf howl and human scream. It staggered back a step, turning its furious, glowing eyes on Dale. Dark blood, almost black in the moonlight, was welling from a dozen wounds on its torso and the place where Travis's bullet had hit. But it was still standing. It was hurt, it was angry, and it was still lethally dangerous. My mind finally caught up with my body. The analytical part of my brain that knew about pipe pressures and weld integrity was gone, replaced by a primal circuit that screamed, "Survive." I raised my .30-30, found the creature's chest in my sights, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against my shoulder. I saw a patch of fur and flesh erupt from its chest, just below the shoulder. It shrieked, a sound that clawed at my ears, and hunched over, clutching the wound. It looked down at its chest, then back up at me, and the look in its eyes was no longer just malice. It was hatred. Pure, focused, personal hatred. It took a step toward me, its lips peeled back from its enormous teeth, a low growl building in its throat. I worked the lever on my rifle, ejecting the spent casing and chambering a new one. The simple mechanical action was the only thing keeping me grounded. Dale fired again, another deafening blast. The creature flinched as more pellets tore into its hide. It was bleeding freely now, from at least 3 major wounds, but it was still on its feet. It looked from me to Dale, as if trying to decide which of us to kill first. That half-second of hesitation was all we needed. "Travis," Dale yelled, his voice cracking. "We gotta get Travis." He started moving toward his nephew, keeping his shotgun aimed at the creature. I knew he was right. We weren't going to win this fight. Our only hope was to get out. I backed away slowly, keeping my rifle trained on the thing. Its eyes followed me, glowing in the dark. It took another halting step, then another. It was hurt, but it was still coming. Daisy, my brave girl, made her move. She must have seen her chance while it was focused on us. She launched herself from her low crouch, a 45-pound cannonball of muscle and teeth, and latched onto the back of the creature's leg, right above the weird, backward-bending ankle. The creature howled in surprise and pain, twisting around to snap at her. Daisy held on, her whole body shaking with the effort, buying us precious seconds. "Go!" I screamed at Dale. He had reached Travis and was trying to haul him to his feet. Travis was conscious, groaning, blood soaking the front of his jacket. Copper, the remaining bay dog, had bolted, a brown streak disappearing into the woods. I couldn't blame him. I fired my rifle again, not even aiming carefully, just putting another round into its center mass to try and keep its attention off Daisy and Dale. The bullet hit it in the gut. It buckled, swiped its hand down its leg, and tore Daisy off, flinging her through the air. She hit a pine tree with a sickening thud and fell to the ground, limp. A part of me died right there with her. The creature straightened up, breathing in ragged, wet gasps. It looked at me, at Dale dragging Travis away, and then at the tree line. It seemed to make a decision. Instead of charging us again, it turned and crashed into the underbrush in the opposite direction, moving with a staggering but still incredibly fast gait. We could hear it breaking branches and thrashing through the woods, the sounds getting fainter and fainter until they were gone. The silence that descended on the clearing was more profound than before. It was a vacuum, filled only by the ringing in my ears, Travis's pained moans, and my own ragged breathing. For a moment we just stood there, Dale holding up Travis, me with my rifle half raised, staring at the spot where the thing had disappeared. The adrenaline was a roaring fire in my veins, but underneath it, a deep, bone-aching cold was starting to set in. "We have to go," Dale said, his voice a strained whisper. "Now." We didn't even think about the dogs, not consciously. The survival instinct was too strong. We half-dragged, half-carried Travis back the way we came. He was a dead weight, barely able to put his feet under him. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every rustle of leaves was the creature coming back to finish the job. It was the longest 300-yard walk of my life. Getting back to the truck felt like reaching a fortress. We threw Travis into the back seat, and I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key into the ignition. The engine turning over was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. I slammed the truck into gear and spun the tires in the dirt, fishtailing onto the little lease road and flooring it. I didn't slow down until we hit the pavement of the county road 5 miles later. I drove with one hand, the other holding my .30-30 in my lap, my eyes constantly scanning the dark tree line on either side of the road. No one said a word the whole way to the hospital in Livingston, which was a good 40 minutes away. The only sounds were Travis's quiet whimpering and the hum of the tires on asphalt. We rolled up to the emergency room entrance, and the chaos started all over again. Nurses and orderlies came running out. We had to concoct a story on the fly. A boar, we said. A monster boar, bigger than any we'd ever seen, charged us in the dark. It was the only explanation that made any kind of sense in the real world. They got Travis inside, and the doctors went to work on him. The claws had laid open his chest and arm, 4 deep gashes that went almost to the bone. They'd missed his main arteries by a fraction of an inch. The doctor, a young guy with tired eyes, said he'd never seen a boar do that kind of damage. The cuts were too clean, too parallel. He looked at us with suspicion, but we just stuck to our story. A sheriff's deputy showed up, a heavy-set man with a droopy mustache who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He took our statements in a small, sterile, white family room. We told him the boar story again. Dale did most of the talking. I just sat there, still smelling the creature's stench in my nostrils, seeing its yellow eyes every time I blinked. The deputy wrote it all down in his little notebook, his expression a mixture of boredom and disbelief. He asked if we'd been drinking. We said no. He asked why we didn't bring the boar in. We said it ran off after we shot it. He asked about the dogs. I told him it killed 2 of them. My voice broke when I said it. He gave me a look that was almost sympathetic, then closed his notebook and said animal control would probably put out some traps in the area. We all knew it was a formality. He left, and we were alone again in the humming silence of the hospital. We had to go back. We couldn't leave Belle and Daisy out there. Dale and I drove back to the lease the next morning, after the sun was well up. It was a beautiful, clear fall day, the kind of day that felt like a mockery of the night before. Driving back through the gate felt like willingly walking into my own tomb. We parked the truck in the same spot. The air was clean, smelling only of pine. We walked to the clearing in broad daylight, both of us carrying rifles, stepping carefully, scanning the trees. The clearing looked so different. It was just a patch of dirt and grass. But the signs were there. The ground was torn up. We found our spent casings, 1 from Travis's shattered rifle, 2 from Dale's shotgun, 2 from my .30-30. We found a few spots of that dark, blackish blood on the leaves, but not nearly as much as there should have been from an animal that had been hit that many times. It was like it barely bled. We found the place where Travis had fallen and the 2 pieces of his rifle. But the dogs were gone, both of them. Belle's body wasn't there. Daisy wasn't by the tree. There was no blood trail, no drag marks, nothing. They had just vanished. We searched for an hour, spiraling out from the clearing, calling their names until our voices were raw. There was nothing. It was the most unsettling thing of all. A predator might kill and eat its prey on the spot, or drag it off. But to take 2 dead dogs, leaving almost no trace, it made no sense. We found tracks, though. In a patch of soft mud near the creek bed, we found a set of them. They were huge, 5-toed, like a distorted human footprint, but with a clear canine pad structure at the base, and deep impressions where the claws had dug in. They were not bear tracks. They were not human. They were the footprints of the thing that had broken our world. We never hunted on that lease again. Dale let it go the next month. I sold my rifles. I sold the dog boxes out of my truck. I gave Copper, my last remaining dog, to a cousin who lived 2 counties over, somewhere with smaller woods. I couldn't look at him without seeing the other 2, without feeling that cold dread in the pit of my stomach. Going into the woods after dark, it's not something I can do anymore. A part of me that loved the night, that found peace in the solitude of the forest, was killed in that clearing. It was replaced by a constant, low-level anxiety, a feeling of being watched from just beyond the light. Travis recovered physically, mostly. He has a set of massive, ugly scars on his chest that he'll carry for the rest of his life. But he's not the same kid. The easy confidence is gone. He's quiet, jumpy. He doesn't hunt anymore either. He and Dale and I, we don't talk about that night. It's a black hole in our family's history that we all tacitly agree to navigate around. What's the point? There are no words for it. No explanation that satisfies. I spent months afterward online, late at night when I couldn't sleep, searching for answers. I found the stories, the same ones I used to laugh at. Dogman, werewolf, upright canine. Hundreds of reports from all over the country, all describing the same impossible creature. The same height, the same digitigrade legs, the same canine head with intelligent, glowing eyes. It gave me a name for what I saw, but it didn't give me any comfort. It just made the world feel bigger, darker, and full of terrible possibilities I'd been blissfully unaware of. So why am I telling this now? I guess because keeping it locked inside feels like a betrayal. A betrayal to Belle and Daisy, who died facing something they shouldn't have had to. A betrayal to anyone else who might find themselves walking in the woods one night and feel that sudden, unnatural silence. I'm not here to convince you. Belief is a personal thing. If you want to think I'm lying, or that we were drunk, or that we misidentified a bear in the dark, that's fine. I probably would have too, 5 years ago. But I know what I saw. I know the sound of its growl and the weight of its stare. I know the smell of its breath and the flash of its claws in the moonlight. That reality is burned into me. It's a part of my cellular makeup now. All I can say is this: if you're out there in the deep woods and the night goes silent, listen to that silence. If the hair on your arms stands up for no reason, trust that feeling. If your dogs act scared of something you can't see, believe them. Don't be a skeptic. Don't be a fool like I was, so confident in the tidy, explainable world you've built for yourself. Because there are things in the deep, dark places of the world that don't fit in our books, that defy our science. And they are very, very real. And all I'm left with, all these years later, is the memory of its eyes, filled with an ancient and terrible intelligence, and the knowledge that we didn't win a fight that night. We just survived. It let us go, and I have to live with the fact that I have no idea why.